Hello, and welcome to today's Bloomberg DNA webinar titled Artificial Intelligence and the Role It Has in Payroll. I'd now like to introduce today's speakers. Brandon Moreno. As the president at EverHive Corporation, Brandon has a deep domain knowledge in talent and innovation, change management, and operational effectiveness. He provides contingent worker program leadership for emerging and leading-edge companies. Sean Ring. As a business development manager for Innovative Employee Solutions, Sean is committed to empowering and enabling Fortune 1000 companies to position themselves as leaders in both flexibility and compliance in the global evolution of the gig economy. I'd now like to turn the presentation over to Brandon and Sean.
Thank you, Alex. It's definitely, this is Brandon Moreno. It's definitely a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate everyone for being on the call, and also thank Bloomberg for having us present on this.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Ring. Brandon, great to be here with you. Brandon and I met several years ago at an HR conference. Brandon is definitely a thought leader in the talent space and has a vast history of HR and the related technology that goes along with that. Brandon was named HR Professional of the Year by the San Diego Business Journal, and when he and I met, there was an instant connection. We're both passionate about the future and how that pertains to the space that we're in, and excited to be here today to talk to you guys a little bit about AI and some of the implications of that in the future to come.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, and like Sean had mentioned, when we met, you know, it was very fascinating to talk with him, to see his passion for the future, for businesses, for really helping elevate organizations and its people to the next level. And Sean has immersed himself into some really thought-provoking and thought-leading organizations. He's CCWP certified. He's been very active in the ACA or ASA, Staffing Association Corporate Social Committee. He's also forming various groups here in the Bay Area of California. So just it's really a treat and honor to be sharing the platform with him today. So imagine for a moment, it's the year 2025 and a blistering cold morning in the eastern coast of the United States. And as you prepare to work, you glance outside your window and you see snow is covering the ground. As you think about stepping outside, a chill runs through your bones because you know how cold it is, but that is where you eventually must go. You decide to warm up first, and you ask Alexa to turn the thermostat up to heat your room. You also ask Alexa to turn on the coffee pot so that your favorite cup of joe is brewing. There is something else you want to ask Alexa, but as you begin to turn your focus on learning the most recent events for the day, you suddenly realize how much technology has advanced and made life more convenient for you. It is predicted by the year 2025, computing processing power will outpace the human brain, which processes what's called exaflop per second. What is that? That is a billion calculations per second. So to put that into perspective, in 2014, researchers in Japan attempted to match the processing power of only 1 second from 1% of the brain. It took the world's 4th fastest supercomputer in the world 40 minutes to crunch calculations for a single second of brain activity. So over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to share with you 5 key learnings that will have you contemplating how AI can be useful to your organization and your departments, especially finance, payroll, and HR. There's a lot of information here, and we've broken it down so that it's easy to understand. And wherever you are, because you are listening to us share these insights with you, we know that you are the change makers and disruptors of organizations. You are the strategic ones who will take the information, present new ideas, and be able to apply it to your work. So some of the things that we're going to learn today is we're really going to talk about AI and how companies are beginning to leverage it.
Yeah, next we're going to go into, how AI is already disrupting various organizations and how we foresee that happening in the future as well.
And before we get started with all that, we really want to kind of break down what the terms of AI, what they are, because there's a lot of information. So we'll break those down where it's easy for you to understand.
We want to dive into some of the myths out there. I think there's a lot of conversation. You see AI almost everywhere these days, and so there's a lot of different storylines and myths. So we want to kind of go over what are the myths, what are the realities when it comes to AI and its applications today.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about machine learning, and you'll learn here that that's just one of the terminology and one of the facets of AI, but how it will improve the efficiencies of payroll.
Awesome. Well, let's talk really quickly about artificial intelligence. I know that's what we're all here to talk about today, and I think that it's really important that we get a basis for understanding what we're talking about. So before we get into any specific examples of AI and how it's being applied, we really want to get a baseline understanding of what it is. I think you hear about it so often, and I think our goal today is to leave you guys with not just an idea of how that may impact your organization already today and in the future, but really a baseline for having a conversation with others intelligently about really what this is and what's going on and how it's to be used. So what is AI? So artificial intelligence is really referring to a computer system and its ability to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. Some common examples that we see of this in the marketplace and early AI applications are visual perception, speech recognition, programs that are able to make decision-making, able to make decisions, as well as translate between languages without human interaction. So AI is enabled through cognitive computing, okay? So that's a simulation of human thought processes into a computerized model. Cognitive computing involves self-learning systems, which we'll get into in a little bit. Those use data mining, and in almost every instance of artificial intelligence, we're talking about vast amounts of data required to make this work. In that data mining, you then have heaps of data that is then used to find pattern recognition of all kinds, and you can train these algorithms to look at any sorts of patterns and to recognize different things within those patterns to end up making decision. You then have natural language processing that all ties this in to mimic the way that the human brain works. Now, the development of artificial intelligence alongside complementary technical advances such as robotics, you've heard about big data for a number of years now. All of these things together, when combined, are forecast to have a profound development on the future of work. And that gets to the dystopian kind of views that you see out there about many traditional occupations that may be threatened by artificial intelligence. However, we believe, and we have evidence for that as well, that many new occupations will emerge. So when we talk about AI, it's really computers mimicking the human brain, and a lot of people find that scary in a lot of ways, and some of us find that really exciting. But either way, it's growing incredibly rapidly. I read in The Economist magazine this morning that venture capital firms are investing in AI more than ever. That's growing at a 20 to 30% clip year over year. There's now billions of dollars flowing of venture capital into AI. So as much as we are hearing about it today, I don't expect that to slow down, and we're going to probably continue to hear about the rise of AI going forward. So this is a funny little a slide. I think this kind of resembles a lot more of the conversations that may be had in the workplace today in regards to AI. I don't think that a lot of folks have a real grasp on the definition and kind of the concepts that we just covered and what that really means. And so also when we talk about mimicking the intelligence of the human brain, maybe the person sitting next to you isn't the type of intelligence that you feel like would actually add value to your operation. So this is just a funny little comic that we figured we'd throw in here. The beauty of AI is that with the data and the algorithms that you can train, we can eliminate areas where maybe the human brain loses focus. I know we're all basically in one way or another addicted to technology and our cell phones and social networks, and it's really easy for us to lose focus in an algorithm. That's not possible, so we can get them to focus in, and we can also train those to eliminate some bias as well. So maybe you think human intelligence is something worth mimicking, and in some cases it's not, but the beauty is that with AI you can really train algorithms to do so many different things that will drive efficiency in the way that many humans are not doing so now. So I think let's move to our first poll question of the day.
Yeah, and as you're thinking about going through the presentation, think about the areas that it can apply into your organization and where you might be able to bring forth different ideas and different ways of doing things, because there's such a lot of information, so many things, like Sean was saying, that you could do, that this will really help.
Yeah, absolutely,
All
Brandon.
right.
And I agree with you so much. I think one underlying theme that we're going to see, a little bit in today's presentation is that it's really up to you to decide in many ways, which applications are best for your organization. I mean, so many of us are faced with different challenges in our businesses, but to understand it first and then to start thinking about, okay, how can we apply this to some of the big problems that we're trying to solve is really the mindset that we want you to have.
All right, we'll give 5 more seconds for the polling question, which is, are you currently using AI in your organization? So, give you 5 more seconds. Go ahead and lock in your answer.
Now, it looks like we're getting a really even distribution.
So the results are 20.4% are using, which is impressive because we'll get into the stats in a little bit, but that's great that that you're using AI. We talk to a lot of folks, and when we start talking about different technology, they don't even realize that is AI that's powering that. 34.6% said no. Another 20.4% said no, but you're planning to, which leads, again, right into the statistics that we'll get into in a little bit. And 24.4% are unsure. So for those who are unsure, you're probably a lot more sure than you believe you are, because, when we talk to it, it's more, there's usually a lot of percentage that is a lot higher than that. So by the end of this webinar, you will be able to recognize whether you're using AI or not within your organization. Sean, anything else?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a great representation of, seeing that even distribution. We've got people that know they're using it, a lot that are planning to if they're not already, but those unsure is what interests me too, is that more than likely there's some facet of AI that's in your organization, and we're all bringing a lot to the table as well. So AI is kind of one of those things that's tricky, that's underlying in a lot of things that we're already using. So this is great stuff, and I think to echo your sentiments, Brandon, I think we'll find by the time we get done here today that pretty much everyone is using AI in some capacity now, and yeah, it's interesting to see how those results are so evenly distributed. So building upon that, let's talk about our personal lives and how, we talked about a really overarching definition of what AI is, but Brandon led off today's conversation with, this great example of what it's like to have a smart home or talk to Alexa. And we all know of Siri. We've been interacting with her through the iPhone for many years. I'm an Android guy, so I don't do that. They have a new AI on my Samsung Galaxy called Bixby. I'm not particularly a huge fan of it, but there is AI that has entered every single one of our lives over the last decade, and it comes in a variety of places. We touched on Siri, Alexa. The Google Home is now, making its way into a lot of people's homes, and we can control our homes through our voice, which is definitely AI. As I was reading through the venture capital companies that are investing heavily in AI, big swaths of that investment was going towards self-driving cars. And we see a lot of the big players, Uber, Alphabet, which is a company that owns Google, and their Waymo division. People are funneling tons of money into self-driving cars, and so that's one of the main areas we're seeing AI today. Teslas already have, a very basic self-driving mode. It's fascinating to see that space grow. Many of us are familiar with IBM Watson. IBM has unleashed Watson for a number of different business applications, but its original coming out moment or claim to fame was when it beat Ken Jennings, who was a rock star on Jeopardy, and several other folks that were really great at Jeopardy. And IBM's Watson was able to listen to the questions or the answers, as it were, for Jeopardy that were being presented, and absolutely blow these guys out of the water. And that was kind of the first instance of us saying, wow, artificial intelligence algorithms really can compete and then beat humans. Earlier this year, the same happened with the game Go. If you're not familiar with that, it's, IBM Watson had beat Gary Kasparov in chess years ago. The game Go, which has infinitely more options for moves and is a much more complex game than chess, the AI was able to beat the best player in the world at Go, and then also they've been able to funnel information into that algorithm to have that AI train itself by playing itself in the game of Go. So it doesn't have to play against humans to learn, which is pretty fascinating. And then, last of all, one that I think is in all of our worlds, or most of our worlds at this point, is Netflix. And the AI in Netflix is really the instance of it learning your preferences over time. So if you're adding ratings to things, that certainly helps, but it's tracking what you are watching and the types of shows, and it's able to learn over time your preferences to offer you a better viewing experience. So there's a number of ways that we're already, each and every one of us is interacting with AI in our daily lives. And that brings me to where we see that.
Oh, hey, Sean.
Yeah, go ahead, Brendan.
Just go back to that one slide. So just
sure.
two comments here, very interesting. Speaking about self-driving cars, a German scientist predicts, or something I read probably about a year ago, but has predicted that for every person being born today, they will not have a driver's license, because by the time that they're able to drive and legally able to drive, there will be only self-driving cars. So very interesting concept when we think about that. That is not far off. That is here today. And then even with IBM Watson, a lot of hospitals are starting to have this. If you work for healthcare, you will know this, in that they're investing in this. And why? It's because doctors are able to get information on a diagnosis way sooner than they would if they were individually able to just look at a person. So what they do is they enter in this information into IBM Watson, and then based on the vast information of computing power and on what's out there, Watson will then spit back a potential diagnosis for the doctor to review. So think about healthcare and how that's being elevated. today. It's not even something that's talked about. It's what's here today.
Yeah, that's true, Brandon. And you know, you touched on the fact that people are predicting that people born today will never need a driver's license or have to drive a car. And I think that that's correct. You also see a lot of people predicting that as these autonomous vehicles hit the road, Google's Waymo has already put in 4 million miles on public roads of their autonomous vehicles. And so as the Uber fleets begin to have no people driving them, the cost of an Uber is going to plummet significantly because the vast majority of the cost that goes into that is the human that's driving. And so as we adopt electric vehicles, those become autonomous. A lot of people are predicting that vehicle ownership as a whole is going to plummet greatly because there's not going to be a need for us to own vehicles because we can just call an Uber, an autonomous vehicle picks us up wherever we're at in whatever size or shape we need for that moment, and the cost to get around will be virtually nothing. So the economics behind owning a vehicle will essentially be not make sense for the average person anymore, and really the only people that would have a car that they drive would be, you know, car enthusiasts.
I have to tell you, I've been in one of these self-driving cars, and it's a little scary. So it's just interesting that, you know, to get used and to change our mindset and philosophy that to trust that it's going to take you to where it needs to.
Yeah, and you know, I think it is that trust at first, but once we see that these algorithms and the sensors and all of the things that are involved in these autonomous vehicles are actually much safer than a human being. I think most of the accidents that occur are, you know, human error and can be avoided. So, you know, you see a disruption coming from the autonomous vehicles. It's not just the cars. You know, insurance companies are going to be disrupted because we'll no longer need to have car insurance. Anyone in the parking business, you know, as these autonomous vehicles and their fleets take over cities, people won't need to park, and so there's a lot of different ancillary areas that are going to be disrupted with the onset of autonomous vehicles. All right, so these are some areas, you know, these are some big picture areas, places that we're seeing that in our personal lives, and you know, obviously the vehicle effect is going to, you know, be wide-ranging to all of us. But for those of you who are in either finance or payroll or human resources, this slide gives you an idea of just how many tech companies are in your space. And I think when I look at this with this slide with our clients and with human resources executives, you know, sometimes we'll go through and see how many of these logos or these companies that they can identify. And oftentimes there's, you know, we can get to maybe 10 or so, but to really, what I want to impart here with this slide is you as in a human resources function in whichever place you are, whether that's in recruiting or operations or payroll, you know, there's technology that is emerging every single day to solve your problems. And we as HR professionals need to understand that we have to also be a technology professional. We need to be constantly studying what's in the marketplace and how it can solve our problems. You know, you've got 125 companies here, and not every single one of these is specializing in an artificial intelligence function, but many of them are implementing AI in some way, shape, or form to be able to solve current problems that you have. And I think the underlying theme here is that you've got to constantly be learning and upskilling your knowledge and being aware of what's on the marketplace. Now, you're on this webinar today, so that tells me that you're already interested in those things, but I think you need to continue to do that because every single facet of our profession is being disrupted one way or another, and we've got this whole toolkit of technology solutions that we can implement to solve some of the problems that we've had. Brandon, anything to add on that?
Yeah, good overview. And, you know, I think, Sean, you would agree with just being in the HR and global payrolling space is that, you know, oftentimes we're always hearing these organizations say, how can we be more strategic? This is an area that's not just talking about how to be strategic, but this is going to elevate you so that people start listening to your ideas, what you have, and how to really have cost savings to your organization, get back time. So these areas, this is really the area to start paying attention in and to elevate the conversations you're having from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah, and I think, that the word strategic is great, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Brandon, because for so long, multiple functions of HR have been looking for ways to get out of the administrative weeds, for lack of a better term. So to get up out of the weeds and to be strategic, and the way that you can do that is leveraging technology to be able to automate some of the predictable and really mundane admin tasks of your role. So let's see. We do have a question that's come in, and I'd like to address it really quick. There are, the question is, are there any payroll companies that are reinventing payroll? And the answer is yes. There's a variety of technology platforms out there. One in particular that I have seen demos of and have worked with is Ultimate Software, UltiPro, and they've kind of got some elements of AI right now that are, I haven't actually had to practice with them inside my organization, but some examples of what they're able to do in their system, and they've created basically what I would call their version of a Siri, and it's called Xander. And Xander uses natural language processing, which we'll get to in just a second, to automatically understand, predict, and prescribe personalized actions from relevant human capital management data. So within that platform, they're saying that they can make predictions on workforce behaviors, including retention and performance. So they can gain insights into who's at risk, which of your employees are at risk for leaving the company. And they're actually experimenting that with across the software platform. It's only implemented in a few areas right now, but those type of personalized recommendations that can go out to your managers and leaders based on real relevant people data can be pretty powerful. So that's one to watch out for. There's several others, but it's really kind of, we're at the dawn of really actionable insights for those things. Anything you want to add to that, Brandon?
No, I think that was perfect, and just a reminder to use the Q&A box to ask us questions, and we'll either answer them as we go along, or we have a spot towards the end as well, but we encourage you to ask the questions. Great question.
Great. So moving right along, I think let's define some of the common terms that you're going to see as you study the AI landscape. As I said before, I think there's a lot. You hear about it all the time, but I think it's really important to actually understand what's happening and to be able to use these terms intelligently to understand and have a conversation about how they can solve your problems. So Brandon and I will go through some of these common definitions, the first being machine learning. I think this is probably the most common term that you hear of when you talk about artificial intelligence, and really machine learning at its most basic is the practice of using algorithms to parse data, learn from it, and then make a determination or a prediction about something in the world. So rather than hand-coding a software program with routines or a predetermined specific set of instructions to accomplish a task, with machine learning, the machine is actually trained using vast amounts of data and algorithms that give it the ability to learn how to perform that specific task. So one example of machine learning in finance would be fraud detection systems. And those used to depend on really robust and complex sets of rules. However, in modern AI-embedded fraud detection programs, the AI actively learns and calibrates itself to new potential or real security threats. And using machine learning, it can detect unique activities, anomalies, and flag them for security teams. You can get a text instantly when something happens on your credit card, things of that nature. That's AI happening, and the real threats are then presented to human security teams. So one of the big challenges for those systems in machine learning for fraud detection is avoiding false positives. So it's not, it's not completely refined, but we've got systems now that are doing amazing things.
Natural language processing, or NLP, it's really the ability for automation or machines to understand and interpret human language the way it is spoken. So in other words, natural language processing applications will allow users to communicate with a computer in their own words. So the ultimate goal is really to fill the gap how we as humans communicate and what the machine understands. There's a slew of examples for this. For instance, speech recognition, where the computer converts spoken words into data. So think about it. When you send a text via voice, this is actually natural language processing when it converts your voice to a text message. Another example is Skype Translator, which translation is interpreted live from a number of languages. So I could be talking in English to someone in China and then talking in Chinese to me, and it gets automatically interpreted. That's natural language processing. So how else can it be helpful? Customer reviews. So it makes it easy to gather information, reviews from a website, understand what consumers are actually saying. And this is beneficial because it can improve customer satisfaction. You will better understand the needs of customers and be able to suggest more relevant products or services. And how is this helpful in the HR, payroll, financial world? Well, think about the efficiency and the accuracy and the time savings that is there, and the change of focus that would occur when you have these time savings and these efficiencies. There's an article I read from Master of Code, and they talked about bots and chatbots, which is a whole nother conversation, but I'll share with you briefly about two primary ways that bots increase employee efficiency. First, by reducing the tenuous tasks that your employees have to perform, and then second, by making you and your employees better at their jobs. So the chatbots decrease the time and the resources that are traditionally required for various organization functions, including customer support, invoice processing, catalog management, HR management. And when you see this reduction, it's also accompanied by an increase in accuracy, which, as you know, being in the space that you are, that this is especially relevant if you think about payroll, invoice processing, HR management, those types of areas. Another interesting component is, read an article on Accenture Strategy, who worked with a global science company that generated savings via implementation of a digital procurement function utilizing this. And the procurement leadership reinvested 10% of the savings generated by reallocating headcount that allowed them to dedicate them to strategic supplier relationship management. Then another interesting component of this article was that healthcare and banking providers using bots can expect an average time savings of just over 4 minutes per inquiry, which equates to an average cost savings in the range of 50 to 70 cents per interaction. It adds up quickly. According to Juniper Research, this could total $8 billion in savings per company annually by the year 22. Think about that. That's like 4 years away. $8 billion with a B per company annually. So chatbots alone can help take your business processes to the next level and increase huge competitive advantages.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. The next, natural language processing is certainly making big efficiency gains, but so is deep learning, and it's kind of interesting to see how this is going to play out. A couple examples of deep learning would be a program that can automatically restore accurate colors to a black and white photo or film. So because you've fed such vast amounts of data and patterns into these algorithms, a deep learning network can actually then learn all of those patterns that naturally occur in photos. So think the sky is usually blue and clouds are often white or gray and grass is usually green. And all of a sudden you're taking black and white film and photos, you run it through this machine, and without any interaction from a human whatsoever, you've restored almost full rich colored data into 100% accuracy into these. Now let's stick with the photo example, another example of deep learning. Many of us are used to computers that automatically categorize our photos with labels. An example would be Facebook recognizing our faces and tagging our friends automatically. Well, for deep learning, that will actually take this a few steps further. And a trained deep learning network can identify dozens of interesting areas within a single image and then actually write a sentence in English grammar about what's happening in each of those areas, which is absolutely fascinating to me. So not only in that situation is the computer able to learn to classify the different elements within the photo, whether that be a building, a person, a car, but they can actually then translate them into a sentence using English grammar, which is absolutely fascinating.
Sean, would you say that this is where the industry part is going? Like deep learning is that next stage? Like that's kind of the next stage, right? Of taking all this information and moving it forward.
Yeah, 100%, because I think what you're talking about now is some of the things that we've come to understand is, okay, we can gain efficiencies here and we can categorize and label things. We see that within our email, if you're an Outlook or whatever email program you're using, we've already seen those elements that can help us set rules and we'll notice our patterns and categorize things. But now with deep learning, we're talking about actually automatically adding context, right, and communicating to us between the layers beyond what is just giving something a label or a category, which is incredibly interesting. So as we see that deep learning component, I think you're exactly right. As we see that continue to be applied across organizations, it really is the next step, because it's now taking things that are often just tactical and adding context and going several levels deeper into how a computer can really act a lot more like a human being.
Got it. Well, in neural networks, it's sometimes referred to as machine intelligence, right? It's really considered a subset of machine learning. And you think about this, it's really to mimic the operations of the neurons in the human brain. So according to TechTarget, a neural network is initially trained or fed just large amounts of data. The training consists of providing the input, telling the network what the output should be. So to give you an example of this, if you were to build a network to identify the faces of actors, initial training might be a series of pictures of actors, non-actors, masks, so on and so forth. Each input is accompanied by the matching identification, such as the names of the actors, not the actor, not human, so on. And so providing the answers allows the model to adjust its weightings to learn how to do its job better. So for example, if these nodes, David and Diane and Dakota, tell node Ernie the current input is Brad Pitt, but Durango says, no, it's Betty White. And the training program confirms it's Brad Pitt. Ernie will decrease the weighting it's assigned to Durango's input and increase the weighting it gives to the other inputs. And Michael Davison, A True Interaction, gives some great examples of how neural networks can be applied. So just in marketing, think about this, and I'll go through a few groups. It will help divide the market into distinct groups of customers with different consumer behavior. So neural networks are well equipped to carry out this function by segmenting customers according to basic characteristics, including demographics, socioeconomic status, geographic location, so on and so forth. Retail and sales, neural networks are excellent in the realm of sales forecasting. They can also benefit retail and sales. Think about a shopping cart analysis, such as gathering and inputting information relating to which products you purchase together. So if you're ever on Amazon, I'll say, hey, think about these other customers have bought this and this together. That's an example of that. Banking and finance. So one of the main areas of banking and finance that has been affected by neural networks is trading and financial forecasting. So this has been going on probably since the 90s. But, banks have used this also. You think about credit scoring. This is all an example of this. This is that they use to determine which loan applicants they lend money to. So as you hear, like, hey, the FICO scores have updated their criteria. That's because they've updated their neural networks in the processing of that. Insurance, neural networks can be trained to learn to detect fraudulent claims or unusual circumstances. Telecommunications, some companies are using a series of neural networks to analyze customer and call center data in order to predict if and when and why a customer is most likely to leave for another competitor. So you can see the huge advantage that this takes. Another area is operations management. So neural networks have been successfully used in operations management, specifically in the areas of scheduling, planning, R&D regarding the scheduling of machinery, assembly lines. So think about it this way. An example of this might include a neural network being used to monitor soda bottles to make sure each bottle is filled and capped properly. If you've ever been to, I was recently at a whiskey distillery, and it was fascinating just to see the amount of liquid and weight and the capping, and the sticker had to be in the right, and this was all determined, this was all machinery, right, and then put into the container. It's fascinating that's already being here and used. All right. So some statistics. This is interesting because, again, the statistics are here, and I want to just share briefly that 38% of enterprises are already using AI, with 62% are expecting to use it by next year. So think about just even our initial poll question of the folks that are 20-some-odd% are anticipating to use it. It's on the roadmap, and that's just from this call here alone, right? 33% of employees expect their jobs will be augmented by AI in the near future. This is particularly useful with financial folks. This is where they're seeing it a lot as well, of being able to, instead of the manual work that might take someone 4 hours to process just financials and spreadsheets and all of that, they can then have a bot to be able to run all this data and probably do it in 4 seconds. It would take 4 hours. So it's really fascinating. Then it frees up that employee to do, again, more strategic things. Can you see how all this is starting to tie together? 46% believe that AI will transform their talent acquisition capability. Think about it this way. There's already software out there, and Sean had great demonstration on all the technology, but just in the form of writing better job descriptions. So there's technology out there now that helps organizations write a better job ad based on the results of the right applicants coming in on previous similar jobs. So it's just fascinating that's out there, and that's just one example out of 100 plus that I could think of. 49% believe it will transform payroll and benefits administration. So a lot of this is great information. You also think about it too this way. I always tell folks, that are might be fearful of, what's this going to do for their job. Think about just going back to what it might have been like before the automobile came out, of when the horse, was there, and then all of a sudden there was the introduction of auto, and how many new jobs that would not have been anticipated were created as a result of that. So consider those things as well. Sean, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think what we're seeing is a number of companies that believe they're going to be using AI. I think that number progressing, and we're just asking you a poll question right now to make sure you're paying attention. But the number of companies that plan to use AI by just next year is a massive, 24% increase from what are using it now. So I think it's just fascinating. You talked about some of the applications. I think talent acquisition as well as payroll and benefits administration that are, heavy in the admin are going to be disrupted, and see a lot of, useful solutions come into the market.
All right. So what percentage of companies will be using AI in 2018? It's a lot of data we've been presenting, so we'll close it up in 3 seconds. Lock in your final answer. This was kind of a trick because I used all the data points. So looks like the answers were all across the board. The correct answer is 38% are using it now. 62. Sorry, the trick question was 38%. 62% is the right answer. So you all are listening in and doing well with that. So thank you for that. We'll jump into the next part here. So this is just a representative. I'm not going to go into it, but again, kind of just showing you from a talent acquisition tech perspective, just looking at the ecosystem, how much tech is in your world that you may not even realize. So from an HR and payroll perspective, many companies and technology companies are building AI to make systems be a lot more efficient and faster. Sean?
Yeah, I think, if there's anything we want to show here, again, it's how much technology is coming up and how many things are out there that you probably don't know of. Go check out Talent Tech Labs, do your research of what applications are out there based on your role, but just vast amounts of tech, and many of these companies have launched just over the last several years.
So we're really going to talk about myth versus reality, and just briefly go through, and depending on what side of the fence that someone sits on, AI can be doomsday for humankind, which is their Terminator, or it can be a benevolent force that elevates our lives. So as we debunk some of these myths, notice where you might be and what comes up, because it's really an opportunity to refocus your thinking towards the efficiencies and the accuracies and the convenience that AI provides. So some of the myths. Myth one is it destroys jobs. And the fact is that it really complements our skills and spurs job creation. Again, just kind of like the example I used about when the automobile industry came out. We don't even know yet what types of jobs will be created just in the next 5 years alone as a result of the massive technology advantages that are happening at exponential rates. The other part is they make us stupid. A lot of people say, that's all we do. We're on our phones. We constantly have a computer in our hand. The reality is it actually allows us to make smarter decisions. It enables us and provides us with the data. Think about the Watson and the doctor example. If you were to have a diagnosis a lot faster, that's a potentially life-saving event that enable that doctor to make smarter decisions. Another common myth is it destroys privacy. We hear this. I heard the other day that we're losing all our privacy and it's because of this artificial intelligence. Well, no, it's not because of that. Artificial intelligence, and if you might have heard, so many tech leaders are out there that there's forums and what have you that are helping create and implement laws and regulations that help focus on what AI should and needs to be used for. Another myth is it enables hidden bias and abuse. And that's just, that's not an accurate statement, because if anything, it's really designed to avoid human biases. It really relies on the input from humans to predict the most accurate information. But what it's designed to do is to point out errors, inaccuracies a lot faster than humans would be able to capture it. So again, that they can be elevated and do other strategic things. Love this one. The AI is going to kill us all. So a lot of people have the Terminator image in their mind. And the fact is, no matter how sophisticated AI is, it still struggles to make us a sandwich. It can't put the right amount of peanut butter. It can't put all, that on there. So, there's really a lot of, think about the myths versus facts as you're hearing more and more information about AI. Sean, anything additional?
I wanted to add on just to point number one, that it destroys jobs, and I think the Department of Labor came out with a statistic that said 65% of primary school kids today will be working in professions and careers that have not even been created yet. So as you talked about job creation and gave some examples of that, just think about that for all of us and all of the roles that we do, that we may need to think about constantly upskilling what we do and learning more and more, because the reality is that 10, 20 years down the road, there's going to be heaps and heaps of professions and jobs that we couldn't even come up with, or in our mind just can't even understand what those are yet, because the technology has yet to invent them. So I agree with you that it definitely complements and creates jobs, not destroys them.
All right, so our next polling question. AI will destroy privacy. Fact or myth? Five more seconds. Lock in your answer. Love how everyone is listening.
Yep, overwhelmingly.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, you guys agree with us. That is a myth. There's still a lot of regulation that needs to be implemented, but you are correct. So thanks for paying attention. Now kind of some real examples of how machine learning and artificial intelligence will drive efficiency in payroll. And it's already happening. A lot of your software applications are already doing this, but I want to give you some kind of real examples of how that's going to affect specifically payroll. And here's an example of machine learning and how that is already implemented. So payroll, as most of us know, contains possibly the greatest amount of administrative activity of any of the human resource process or functions. So every pay cycle demands accuracy, timeliness, coordination across multiple entities within your organization, and those demands are coming from both inside and outside, whether that's legal and compliance or just the need to be timely and accurate to get people paid, and we know how important that is. So within our software applications that we're all already using, they've been able to handle many of the basic calculations or the regular analog calculations for many years. Now, if there's bad data in, we know that bad data comes out the other side, and that's what senior or more seasoned payroll professionals are really good at. So the humans in the payroll profession right now are really well suited to assess the accuracy of a payroll in terms of its content, and not really whether the calculations are correct, but whether they appear correct using human logic. So you would notice if somebody's salary had an extra zero attached to it, or if their age was plus or minus a digit, you would recognize that that person is not 7 years old or 700 years old. So that's kind of where humans get really good at recognizing whether things should appear to be correct. Now, work experience allows us to be able to do that, and humans get really good at that. Traditionally, these detection of non-obvious inconsistencies were flagged by people recognizing those errors. With AI embedded software, this is all changing really fast. So with deep learning that we talked about earlier and machine learning accomplished by a computer, we can gradually facilitate the detection of all of those types of errors over time with practice, right? So the more data we know, especially in a large organization, or if we're paying tens of thousands of people, that data set is going to teach itself much quicker, and the AI embedded payroll software will be able to process at nearly 100% accurate payroll runs with almost no margin of error, getting your team out of the weeds and having to recognize those errors. So this is realizable over a period of time with tons of data. It's a facet of deep learning called efficiency by experience, and so these algorithms, the more data they're exposed to over a period of time, they become capable of recognizing more human-type logic errors and can make predictions and recommendations based on what things come out of there. So at the end of the day, what I want to focus on here is that the end result is that AI is a tool to help your team focus on more strategic and complex tasks by reducing errors, eliminating predictable and administrative tasks, and just facilitating you to be strategic. All right. Final polling question. In effect, AI is responsible for assuring everything appears correct, true, or false. And we'll allow just about 5 more seconds for this poll to finish out.
And as we wrap up here, remember it's important. We do have one more polling question, but we will get you out on time, maybe about 1 minute out. So just make sure that you stay on to the last polling question to get full credit. Love how everyone has we'll close the poll, and you are correct.
Yep, 93% say that's false.
Yeah, and that's the humans, if you all remember.
All right, so kind of closing up and tying a bow on the things that we've talked about today, some of the key takeaways that we want you to have is that literally hundreds of companies, many which are startups, but many of the big players in our space are already solving problems utilizing AI.
Yeah, and AI creates net new jobs in areas that we have yet to understand or been invented thus far. So that's what we had been talking about throughout the presentation, the new jobs that are yet to be here.
Yep, I think we've seen through the statistics that organizations are expecting HR, all the functions of HR really, but especially TA and payroll to adapt to new technology solutions that are going to drive them forward. So this is happening very fast.
Yeah, and then those who are integrating AI as part of their solutions are seeing greater productivity and efficiency. So you remember that one thing that else you had to ask Alexa to do was to go ahead and call your Uber.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, the dystopian view is not one that we have, and we've studied this pretty intently, but rather not to worry about AI taking your job away, but allowing AI to make you more strategic in your role, which I think a lot of us would really welcome, getting out of kind of the weeds and the administrative duties that many of our jobs have, so we can now focus on more complex problems.
And our last poll question. So based on what you've heard today, what is your outlook on AI? Love it. 2 more seconds. We will get you out of here on time. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll. Yeah, so you can see that 69, almost 70% are positive, almost 23% are excited. That's exciting for us. And it's okay to, if there's a little bit of fear or negativity that's associated with it, just like I was when I was in the self-driving car. I think that's just natural for us to feel that way. But as you start seeing what the additional benefits are and how it helps, you really start kind of shifting your mindset into the positive side of things. Questions, we are out of time. I appreciate, we weren't able to get to all the questions, but definitely appreciate everyone's time for being here today. Some of the resource contact information that was mentioned, the staffing industry analyst, so I'd like to give them a shout out here, and here's their contact information if you want additional. And we thank you. We thank you for being part of your day, and we thank Bloomberg for allowing us to present on this important topic that we're excited about and see where you all implement it within your organization. Sean?
Yeah, thank you all so much. We're so happy to be able to share this, and both Brendan and I are really excited about this, so feel free to call or email just to chat about this. We're happy to take any more questions that way. I'm super happy to have been able to be a part of this today, so thanks to everyone in attendance as well as Bloomberg, and to you, Brandon, as my co-presenter. Had a great time.
Likewise. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the week and weekend ahead.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I hope everyone found today's discussion to be helpful and insightful. You can register for future Bloomberg BNA webinars by accessing our store at bna.com/learning. You will currently see instructions on how to earn credits for attending today's webinar. Please go to learning.bna.com to retrieve your certificate.